The second stage in lesson planning, once you know what you want to achieve, is figuring out how you will know what your students know and understand. That's part 2, assessment evidence. Now, as you know, or will learn shortly, we are an assessment-driven profession. And as Gallagher and I will iterate and reiterate, if the assessment is a good one, then teaching to it is good teaching. Remember WYDIWYG. You all should teach to the test. That is, we should teach to the excellent assessments that you will create. And, as you will discover by establishing the assessments before we teach, that is, by planning backwardsly, then you know what you need to teach to students for them to succeed on your assessments. So we must practice consistent, frequent, and authentic assessment. Thus, you must think about formative and summative assessments as you plan. And to ensure that students themselves realize that they are learning, you are asked in our version of the lesson plan to think about reflection. You'll need to think about 2 types of assessments, formative and summative. Let's start with the formative. Formative assessments are those that take place during instruction. These are typically informal tasks that check for understanding of smaller or incremental skills needed for mastery. However, these tasks can be formal and measurable, for example, a quick quiz. So your observation of or participation in a discussion can be a formative assessment. The ability of small groups to complete an activity can be formative assessments. A 10-question quiz can be a formative assessment. The key is that the results of these in-progress types of assessment are feedback for you as you teach. They tell you that you might need to reteach something or you might need to redesign your lesson. Formative assessment also tells you when things are going swimmingly. Summative assessment is, as the name suggests, a kind of final assessment of the skills you've taught. Typically, summative assessments are used to evaluate the effectiveness of larger instruction units than a single class period. An end-of-unit assignment, a chapter test, or a midterm or final are the most familiar types of summative assessment. The goal of summative assessments is to determine if students have mastered specific competencies and to identify instructional areas that need additional attention. Even though we tend to think of summative assessments as coming at the end of a series of lessons, I want you to think about them even at the individual lesson level. Therefore, envision how what you are teaching in a particular lesson will be part of a summative assessment. Think about this. Your lesson is about crafting a thesis. Well, mastery of this lesson will be assessed in the final paper students write at the end of the semester. And you can anticipate that in the summative assessment field. I'm also suggesting, however, that we can broaden our definition of summative to indicate that summary assessment can take place at the end of a lesson that spans a few class periods. This could be a longer homework assignment or a more substantial writing assignment, not necessarily a huge essay, but a polished, shorter writing task. I see it as an assessment that allows you to move on to the next topic confident that students have mastered a significant component of your instruction. And additional instruction will be added, and then all of that will be assessed with a larger summative task. Reflection is another area that we have added to the Understanding by Design plan. As I noted in an earlier chat, I expect that all teachers reflect on all they do all the time. But that's not what I mean here. Remember in Ed Psych you learned, I bet, about metacognition, thinking about and understanding how we make sense of stuff, how we learn? Well, one way to further understanding, and remember, understanding entails transfer and application of knowledge. Well, one way to further it is to ask students to reflect on the larger learning elements they are encountering in the classroom. Here you might look back to your essential content questions, or you might ask students about how a particular task or activity from your lesson could help them in other classes or on other occasions. Remember the invention strategies example and how students were asked to use the journalist questions? Well, a reflection task might be something like, ask students to comment on how using the 5 W's and H, who, what, when, where, why, and how, and that's the journalist questions, how using these might help them make sense of a textbook in history or another class as well as in the things they read outside of school. So you're getting students here to reflect on how their learning serves them in ways beyond that particular lesson. That's what I mean by reflection. The aim is to get students to think about their learning and understanding and how what they are learning in a particular lesson might have universal application. And that, my friends, is stage 2, assessment. We put so much emphasis on assessment, and it's really not that daunting. Now, once you know what you want students to learn, and once you've figured out how you will know if they have learned what you want them to learn, only then can you go about designing the lesson that will get them the learning they need. And that's our next step, the actual learning plan. And that's the focus of our next chat.